They called it a ceasefire. I called it a reload. Yesterday morning, my intelligence chief walks into my office without any permission and quickly walks in with a folder marked urgent. He doesn't sit down, he stands there, and he says, "Mr. President, they signed the ceasefire 3 hours ago." I said, "Who signed?" "Israel and Hamas, mediated by the United States. The international community is celebrating. CNN is calling it a breakthrough. The UN is praising diplomatic efforts. Everyone's talking about peace." I said, "Show me the terms." He slides the folder across my desk, 12 pages. I start reading, and by page 3, I know exactly what this is. This isn't a ceasefire. This is a tactical pause. This is a weapons reload disguised as diplomacy. This is them buying time to resupply, reposition, and prepare for round 2. I look up at him. I said, "How long until this fake peace ends and war restarts?" He doesn't hesitate. 6 months, maybe less. I said, "I give it 3. I thinks it will collapse faster than your prediction. Let me tell you what nobody's saying about this ceasefire. Let me show you what's buried in the terms they're not broadcasting on international news. Let me expose what's happening while the world celebrates peace that isn't peace. Article 4, Paragraph 2. Temporary cessation of hostilities pending resolution of security concerns. Temporary, not permanent, not lasting, not real. Temporary. Article 6, Paragraph 1. Humanitarian corridors established for civilian movement and aid delivery under international supervision. Translation: we control who moves where, we monitor who gets what, we supervise who lives and who doesn't, under the banner of humanitarian assistance. Article 9, Paragraph 3. Security arrangements subject to review and modification based on emerging threats and intelligence assessments. Translation: we can restart this war whenever we want. We just need to claim a threat. Any threat. Real or manufactured. And the ceasefire ends. This isn't peace. This is a strategic pause. This is Israel getting international cover to rearm, regroup, and reload. This is Hamas getting time to reposition fighters and rebuild tunnels. This is both sides preparing for the next round while the world thinks the war is over. I've seen this before. Lebanon 2006. They called it a ceasefire. Lasted 18 months. Then round 2. Gaza 2014. They called it a ceasefire. Lasted 2 years. Then round 3. Syria 2016. They called it a ceasefire. Lasted 6 months. Then the worst phase of the war. Every single time, the pattern is identical. Ceasefire announced. International community celebrates. Media coverage decreases. Attention shifts elsewhere. And while nobody's watching, both sides reload. Israel restocks Iron Dome missiles, rebuilds military infrastructure, repairs damaged equipment, rotates exhausted troops, brings in fresh battalions, upgrades weapon systems, all during the ceasefire, all completely legal under the terms. Because the ceasefire doesn't prohibit military preparation, it just prohibits active combat. Hamas rebuilds tunnels, smuggles weapons through Egypt, repositions rocket launchers, recruits new fighters, trains fresh operatives, restocks ammunition, all during the ceasefire. All technically allowed. Because the ceasefire addresses hostilities, not preparations for future hostilities. And when they're both ready, when they're both restocked, when they're both repositioned, someone will claim a violation, someone will cite a security threat. Someone will reference intelligence about imminent danger. And the ceasefire ends, and round 2 begins. Worse than round 1. Because both sides spent the ceasefire preparing for it. This is the scam. This is the game. This is how modern warfare works when international law pretends to constrain it. You don't fight until total victory anymore. You fight until international pressure forces a pause. You pause long enough to reload. You reload while calling it peace. You restart when you're ready. You repeat the cycle. And every cycle, more people die. More infrastructure gets destroyed. More generations grow up knowing nothing but war interrupted by pauses they're told to call peace. I said this yesterday, in a closed meeting with my Security Council. I said, this ceasefire is a scam. They're not making peace. They're reloading for round 2. And when round 2 starts, it will be worse than round 1, because they spent the ceasefire preparing for it. My foreign minister said, "Mr. President, The international community is celebrating this ceasefire. If you speak against it publicly, they'll accuse you of being against peace. I said, I'm not against peace. I'm against calling strategic pauses peace. I'm against pretending temporary cessation of hostilities is the same as ending the conflict. I'm against lying to people about what's actually happening. He said, but the optics. I cut him off. The optics are that thousands of Palestinians are dead, thousands more will die when this ceasefire ends, and the international community will act surprised when it happens. They'll ask how peace failed. They'll wonder why the ceasefire didn't hold. They'll blame both sides for returning to violence, when the truth is, this was never peace. This was always just a reload. 2 hours later, I'm scheduled for a press conference, regional media, international correspondents. Everyone wants to hear Burkina Faso's position on the ceasefire. Everyone expects me to praise the diplomatic breakthrough. I walk to the podium. Cameras everywhere. Reporters ready. And I say what nobody else is saying. They're calling it a ceasefire. I'm calling it a reload. This isn't peace. This is a tactical pause. This is both sides buying time to prepare for round 2. And when round 2 starts, it will be worse than round 1, because they spent the ceasefire getting ready for it. The room goes silent. You could hear breathing. Nobody expected that. A reporter raises her hand. BBC. She says, Mr. President, are you suggesting the ceasefire is not genuine? I said, I'm not suggesting, I'm stating. Read the terms. Article 4 says temporary cessation. Article 9 says security arrangements subject to modification. This ceasefire has an expiration date built into it. It's designed to pause, not to end. Another reporter, Al Jazeera. But Mr. President, surely any pause in hostilities is better than continued fighting? I said, a pause that allows both sides to rearm is not better. A pause that gives them time to prepare for worse violence is not better. A pause that the world mistakes for peace is not better. Because when the fighting restarts, and it will restart, people will be unprepared. They'll be shocked. They'll be disappointed when they should have been warned. When they should have been told the truth, that this was never peace, this was always just a reload. Reuters correspondent, what would real peace look like, Mr. President? I said, real peace would address root causes. Real peace would end occupation. Real peace would establish justice. Real peace would guarantee security for everyone, not just one side. Real peace wouldn't have temporary in the language. Real peace wouldn't have clauses allowing restart of hostilities based on security assessments. Real peace would be permanent, comprehensive, and just. This ceasefire is none of those things. The questions kept coming. For 40 minutes. Every reporter wanting to know why I'm the only leader saying this. Why I'm not celebrating like everyone else. Why I'm calling it a scam when the whole world is calling it progress. And I kept answering. Because somebody needs to tell the truth. Because somebody needs to warn people what's coming. Because somebody needs to expose the game being played. 3 hours after my press conference, the phone calls start. First, the African Union, concerned about my statements, worried I'm undermining peace efforts, suggesting I should be more diplomatic. I said, I'm being honest. If that undermines peace efforts, maybe the peace efforts are built on lies. Then the European Union, a strongly worded message about the importance of supporting diplomatic initiatives, about the need for African leaders to encourage peace processes, about the dangers of inflammatory rhetoric. I said, calling a temporary pause temporary is not inflammatory, it's accurate. If accuracy is inflammatory, your peace process is fragile. Then the United Nations, a formal note expressing concern about statements that could undermine the ceasefire, reminding me of the international community's commitment to peace, encouraging me to use my platform to support diplomatic efforts. I said, I'll use my platform to tell the truth. If the truth undermines your ceasefire, maybe your ceasefire is built on lies people need to believe to feel good about themselves. But here's what they're not telling you in those phone calls. Here's what they're not saying in the official statements. Here's what nobody wants to admit publicly. They know I'm right. They know this ceasefire is temporary. They know round 2 is coming. They know both sides are using this pause to prepare for worse violence. They just don't want anyone saying it out loud, because saying it out loud destroys the narrative, destroys the optics, destroys the ability to claim diplomatic victory, destroys the illusion that they've accomplished something. So they need me to be quiet. They need me to play along. They need me to celebrate the ceasefire like everyone else. Because if I don't, If I keep telling the truth, people might start asking questions. People might start reading the actual terms. People might start understanding what's really happening. And they can't have that, because the whole system depends on people not understanding. The whole game requires people believing the narrative. The whole scam works only if nobody exposes it. Let me show you exactly how this reload works. Let me walk you through the mechanics of what's happening right now while the world celebrates peace. Right now, Israeli defense contractors are fulfilling back orders, missiles, ammunition, spare parts. Everything used in the war is being replaced. Everything damaged is being repaired. Everything depleted is being restocked. Right now, the United States is approving emergency military aid packages. Billions of dollars, justified as replenishing defensive systems, framed as maintaining security, packaged as supporting an ally. But it's reload money. It's preparation for round 2. It's making sure Israel has everything it needs when the ceasefire ends. Right now, Hamas is rebuilding tunnels. The ones Israel destroyed during the war. The ones that took years to build originally. They're being rebuilt during the ceasefire. Under the cover of reconstruction. Under the banner of humanitarian work. But their military infrastructure, their preparation for round 2. They're making sure Hamas can fight when hostilities resume. Right now, weapons are being smuggled into Gaza. Through Egypt, through the tunnels being rebuilt, small arms, rockets, explosives, everything needed to restock, everything required to prepare. Everything necessary to make round 2 worse than round 1. Right now, both sides are training. Israel is rotating troops, bringing in fresh battalions, training them on lessons learned from round 1, preparing them for round 2. Hamas is recruiting new fighters, young men who lost family in the war, who want revenge, who are being trained during the ceasefire to fight when it ends. Right now, intelligence agencies are mapping targets. Israeli intelligence is identifying new Hamas positions, new tunnel locations, new weapons caches, new leadership hideouts, all to be struck when round 2 starts. Hamas intelligence is identifying new Israeli positions, new military installations, new strategic targets, new vulnerabilities, all to be attacked when the ceasefire ends. This is what's happening during the ceasefire. This is what peace looks like in modern warfare. This is the reload. And in 3 months, maybe 6, maybe less, something will happen. An incident, a violation, a security threat, real or manufactured, doesn't matter. It will be cited as justification. The ceasefire will end. Round 2 will begin. Let me tell you exactly how it will happen. Let me show you the script they'll follow. Let me expose the playbook they use every single time. It will start small. A rocket fired from Gaza. A raid in the West Bank. A clash at a checkpoint. An arrest that turns violent. A protest that turns deadly. Something small enough to be plausibly accidental. Something big enough to be called a violation. And both sides will have their narrative ready. Hamas will say they were defending against Israeli aggression. Israel will say they were responding to Hamas provocation. Both will claim the other violated first. Both will cite evidence. Both will demand international condemnation of the other. Both will insist they had no choice but to respond. The international community will call for calm. The UN will issue statements. The US will express concern. Europe will urge restraint. Everyone will say the ceasefire must be preserved. Everyone will call for de-escalation. Everyone will pretend this wasn't planned from the beginning. But the escalation will continue, because it's not spontaneous, because it's not accidental, because both sides spent the ceasefire preparing for this exact moment, because both sides know the script, because both sides are ready. Israel will cite security threats, intelligence reports of imminent attacks, tunnel discoveries, weapons stockpiles, rocket launchers positioned near civilian areas, everything they mapped during the ceasefire, everything they identified while the world thought there was peace, everything they targeted in advance knowing this moment would come. Hamas will cite occupation violations, settlement expansion, arrests without trial, home demolitions, everything that continued during the ceasefire, everything that never actually stopped, everything they documented knowing they'd need justification when fighting resumed. And within 48 hours, maybe 72, the ceasefire will be over, officially, formally, completely. Both sides will declare it void. Both sides will blame the other. Both sides will claim they had no choice. Both sides will say they tried everything to preserve peace, but the other side made it impossible. And round two will begin. And it will be worse. Because both sides spent the ceasefire preparing for it. Because both sides used the pause to reload. Because both sides knew from the beginning that this wasn't peace. This was just a break between rounds. Let me tell you why it will be worse. Let me show you what 3 months of preparation produces. Let me expose what both sides accomplished during the ceasefire. Israel restocked everything. Every missile fired during round one was replaced. Every bomb dropped was replenished. Every artillery shell used was resupplied. The United States approved emergency military aid. $3 billion, justified as replenishing defensive systems, framed as maintaining security, but it's reload money, it's preparation for round two. It's making sure Israel has more weapons than they had at the start of round one. Iron Dome batteries that were depleted are now fully stocked. Interceptor missiles that were running low are now abundant. The system that was struggling to keep up during round one will be more capable during round two. Not because the technology improved, because the ammunition increased. The Air Force restocked precision munitions, the ones they ran low on during round one, the ones they had to ration toward the end, the ones they couldn't use as freely as they wanted. Now they have more. Now they can strike more targets. Now they can hit harder. Now they can sustain operations longer. Ground forces rotated troops, the exhausted battalions that fought in round one are rested, fresh units trained specifically for urban warfare are ready. Soldiers who watched round one from training bases are now deployed to forward positions. The military that was tired at the end of round one is energized for round two. Intelligence services mapped new targets. During the ceasefire, while everyone thought there was peace, Israeli intelligence was working. Surveillance drones were flying. Satellites were watching. Informants were reporting. Every Hamas position was identified. Every tunnel entrance was located. Every weapons cache was mapped. Every leadership hideout was documented. The target list for round two is longer and more detailed than the target list for round one. And Hamas restocked everything too. The tunnels Israel destroyed during round one have been rebuilt. The ones that took years to construct originally were reconstructed during the ceasefire. Under the cover of reconstruction, under the banner of humanitarian work, under the guise of rebuilding civilian infrastructure. But their military tunnels, their weapons smuggling routes, their fighter movement corridors, their preparation for round two. Weapons were smuggled through Egypt, through the tunnels being rebuilt, through the border crossings operating during the ceasefire, small arms, rockets, explosives, components for improvised devices. Everything needed to restock. Everything required to prepare. Everything necessary to make round two worse than round one. The rockets fired during round one were replaced. The ones that ran out toward the end are now replenished. The arsenal that was depleted is now restocked. Hamas can fire more rockets in round two than they fired in round one, not because they built more factories, because they smuggled more weapons during the ceasefire everyone called peace. Fighters were recruited, young men who lost family during round one, who watched their homes destroyed, who saw their relatives killed, who want revenge, who are angry, who are ready to fight. Hamas recruited them during the ceasefire, trained them during the pause, prepared them for round two. The force that was diminished at the end of round one is reinforced for round two. Let me tell you exactly who these recruits are. Let me show you what the ceasefire created. Let me expose what happens when you pause war without pursuing justice. Ahmed is 17. He lost his father in round one. Israeli airstrike on what they called a Hamas command center, what Ahmed called his family's apartment building. His father wasn't Hamas. His father was a shopkeeper. But he died anyway, because the building next door housed Hamas operations, because precision strikes aren't that precise, because collateral damage is just a term for dead civilians nobody intended to kill but killed anyway. Ahmed spent the ceasefire burying his father, comforting his mother, trying to feed his younger siblings, watching his family struggle, feeling powerless, feeling angry, feeling like he needed to do something. And Hamas was there. Hamas offered purpose. Hamas offered revenge. Hamas offered a way to make his father's death mean something. So Ahmed joined, not because he's particularly religious, not because he's ideologically committed, but because he's angry and young, and Hamas gave him a direction for that anger. During the ceasefire, while the world celebrated peace, Ahmed was training, learning to fire rockets, learning to build explosives, learning to fight, preparing for round two. And Ahmed isn't alone. There are hundreds like him, maybe thousands, young men who lost someone in round one, who watched their world destroyed, who want payback, who see joining Hamas not as terrorism but as resistance, not as extremism but as justice, not as violence but as self-defense. This is what the ceasefire produced. This is what pausing war without addressing causes creates. This is why round two will be worse. Because every person killed in round one created recruits for round two. Because every home destroyed created motivation. Because every family shattered created rage that Hamas is now weaponizing. Hamas didn't have to work hard to recruit during the ceasefire. They just had to show up. They just had to offer training to young men who already wanted to fight. They just had to channel anger that already existed. They just had to organize rage that the war created and the ceasefire did nothing to address. The training camps operated openly during the ceasefire. Not in secret, not hidden, openly. Because the ceasefire didn't prohibit training. It only prohibited fighting. So Hamas trained fighters, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all preparing for the round two everyone knew was coming. They trained in urban warfare, because round one showed them that's where the fighting happens. They trained in tunnel operations, because round one showed them that's where they survive. They trained in rocket operations, because round one showed them that's how they strike back. They learned from round one, they prepared for round two. They got better at war during the peace. And Israel knows this. Israeli intelligence watched the training camps, monitored the recruitment, tracked the new fighters, documented everything, but they didn't stop it. Because the ceasefire terms didn't require stopping it, because training isn't fighting, because preparation isn't combat, because the ceasefire was designed to pause hostilities, not prevent future hostilities. So both sides prepared, both sides recruited, both sides trained, both sides got ready. During the ceasefire, everyone called peace. Positions were fortified. The buildings that were damaged but not destroyed during round one were reinforced during the ceasefire. The structures that survived are now stronger. The positions that held are now better defended. The locations that were vulnerable are now fortified. Hamas learned from round one. They prepared for round two. They're ready. Walk through Gaza during the ceasefire and you see reconstruction. Buildings being repaired. Rubble being cleared. Infrastructure being rebuilt. The international community funds it. Humanitarian organizations facilitate it. Construction materials flow in. Cement, steel, rebar. Everything needed to rebuild what was destroyed. But look closer. Look at which buildings get priority. Look at where the materials go. Look at what's being constructed under the cover of reconstruction. The building that survived the Israeli airstrike in round one is being reinforced. Not just repaired, reinforced. Thicker walls, stronger foundations, better structural integrity. Hamas learned that building survived because of how it was constructed, so they're making it stronger, making it more resistant, making it harder to destroy in round two. The tunnel entrance that Israel missed in round one is being fortified. Not just maintained, fortified, reinforced entrance, deeper shaft, better concealment. Hamas learned that tunnel survived because Israel didn't find it, so they're making it harder to find. Making it more secure, making it more useful for round two. The position that held during Israeli ground operations in round one is being improved, not just restored, improved. Better sight lines, stronger defensive positions, more advantageous firing positions. Hamas learned what worked in round one, so they're making it work better in round two. This is happening across Gaza, during the ceasefire, under the banner of reconstruction, with international funding, with humanitarian materials. The same cement that rebuilds homes also fortifies military positions. The same steel that repairs buildings also reinforces bunkers. The same materials that help civilians also help Hamas prepare for round two. And everyone knows it. Israel knows it. International organizations know it. Donor countries know it. But nobody stops it, because stopping it means admitting the ceasefire is just preparation for round two. Because preventing it means acknowledging this isn't peace. Because blocking it means recognizing the reconstruction is also rearmament. So the materials flow, the construction continues, the fortification happens. During the ceasefire, everyone celebrates as peace. Hamas engineers studied what Israel destroyed in round one. They analyzed which structures fell. They examined which positions held. They evaluated which defenses worked. They learned. And they applied those lessons during the ceasefire. The buildings that collapsed from airstrikes are being rebuilt differently. Stronger materials, better design, more resilient structure, not just to house civilians better, but to survive bombardment better. Because Hamas knows those buildings will be targeted again in round 2. The tunnels that Israel discovered and destroyed are being rebuilt deeper, harder to detect, more difficult to collapse, better ventilated, more extensive. Because Hamas knows Israel will hunt tunnels again in round 2, so they're making them harder to find and harder to destroy. The defensive positions that Israeli ground forces overran are being redesigned, better fields of fire, more advantageous angles, stronger fortifications, more escape routes. Because Hamas knows Israeli troops will come again in round 2, so they're preparing to fight them more effectively. This is why round 2 will be worse. This is why the death toll will be higher. This is why the destruction will be greater. This is why the suffering will be deeper. The death toll will be higher, because the weapons are more numerous, because Israel has more missiles to fire, because Hamas has more rockets to launch, because both sides have more ammunition to expend, because both sides can sustain operations longer, because both sides can fight harder. Round 1 killed thousands, round 2 will kill more. Not because either side became more brutal, because both sides became more capable, because both sides used the ceasefire to reload, because both sides prepared to fight longer, strike harder, kill more. Let me give you numbers, specific numbers, real numbers, numbers that show exactly why round 2 will be worse. Round 1, Israel fired approximately 30,000 artillery shells, used 15,000 precision munitions, launched 8,000 airstrikes, depleted 40% of Iron Dome interceptors. By the end, they were rationing ammunition, prioritizing targets, conserving resources, because they were running low. During the ceasefire, United States approved $3 billion in emergency military aid. That's enough to replace everything Israel used in round 1 and add 50% more. That's enough to restock depleted arsenals and expand them. That's enough to ensure Israel can fight longer in round 2 than they fought in round 1. The shipments arrived during the ceasefire. My intelligence service tracked them. 3 major deliveries to Haifa port, precision-guided munitions, artillery shells, interceptor missiles, tank ammunition, everything Israel depleted in round 1, plus more, plus upgrades, plus newer systems. Round 1, Hamas fired approximately 10,000 rockets, launched 5,000 mortar rounds, conducted 3,000 militant operations. By the end, their rocket fire decreased. Their operations slowed, their capability diminished, because they were running low. During the ceasefire, Hamas smuggled weapons through Egypt, through rebuilt tunnels, through sea routes. My intelligence service tracked it, estimated 5,000 rockets smuggled in, 3,000 mortar rounds, thousands of small arms, tons of explosives, everything Hamas fired in round 1, plus more, plus longer-range systems, plus more powerful warheads. So do the math. Israel starts round 2 with 50% more ammunition than they started round 1 with. Hamas starts round 2 with 50% more rockets than they started round 1 with. Both sides can fight longer. Both sides can strike harder. Both sides can kill more. Round 1 lasted 50 days and killed 2,000 Palestinians. Round 2 will last longer because both sides have more ammunition, and if it lasts longer, more people die. Simple math, terrible math, but accurate math. And the weapons aren't just more numerous, they're more powerful. Israel didn't just restock what they used, they upgraded. Newer precision munitions, more powerful explosives, better guidance systems. The weapons they'll use in round 2 are more lethal than the weapons they used in round 1. The joint direct attack munitions they used in round 1 are being replaced with newer variants, better penetration, larger blast radius, more effective against hardened targets. The bunker busters that struggled to destroy deep tunnels in round 1 are being upgraded to bunker busters that can reach deeper tunnels in round 2. The artillery shells that Israel fired by the thousands in round 1 are being supplemented with precision artillery in round 2, guided shells, programmable fuses, better accuracy, less waste, more kills per shell, more efficiency and destruction. The drones that Israel flew in round 1 are being upgraded for round 2, better sensors, longer endurance, more weapons capacity, better targeting systems. The surveillance that was good in round 1 will be better in round 2. The strikes that were effective in round 1 will be more effective in round 2. Hamas didn't just replace what they fired, they improved. Longer range rockets, larger warheads, better accuracy. The weapons they'll launch in round 2 are more dangerous than the weapons they launched in round 1. Let me show you exactly what improved means. Let me give you the technical specifications. Let me expose what Hamas acquired during the ceasefire everyone called peace. The Qassam rockets that reached 40 kilometers in round 1 are being replaced with rockets that reach 60 kilometers in round 2. Cities that were safe in round 1 will be threatened in round 2. Populations that were out of range in round 1 will be in range in round 2. 40 kilometers from Gaza puts you in Ashkelon, maybe Ashdod if the wind is right. 60 kilometers from Gaza puts you in Rishon LeZion, puts you in Rehovot, puts you closer to Tel Aviv. Puts you in range of Israel's population centers, puts you in range of millions of Israelis who felt safe in round 1. My intelligence service tracked the smuggling, through tunnels from Egypt, through sea routes when Israeli naval blockade had gaps, through routes we documented but couldn't stop because we're not party to this conflict. We just watch, we just document, we just warn people who don't want to hear warnings. 3 shipments of extended range rocket components, 1 in month 1 of the ceasefire, 1 in month 2, 1 in month 3. Each shipment contained motors, guidance fins, fuel components. Everything needed to extend range from 40 to 60 kilometers. Everything needed to threaten populations that felt safe in round 1. Hamas engineers didn't design these rockets. They don't have that capability. But they have access to designs. From Iran, from Syria, from networks that share technology across borders. They have instructions. They have specifications. They have blueprints. And during the ceasefire, they had time. Time to study. Time to build. Time to test. Time to prepare. The test launches happened at night. Over the Mediterranean. Away from Israeli surveillance when possible. Not all successful. Some failed. Some exploded on launch. Some crashed into the sea. But some worked. Some flew 60 kilometers. Some proved the extended range was real. Some demonstrated that round 2 would threaten cities that round 1 couldn't reach. And Israel knows. Israeli intelligence tracked the shipments too. Israeli radar detected the test launches. Israeli analysts calculated the new ranges. Israeli planners adjusted their defensive strategies. Israeli civil defense updated their warning systems. Israeli authorities expanded evacuation plans. Everyone knows what's coming. Everyone is preparing. Nobody is stopping it. Because the ceasefire doesn't prohibit preparation, it only prohibits fighting. So when round 2 starts, Hamas will fire rockets at cities that were safe in round 1. They'll target populations that didn't need shelters before. They'll threaten areas that didn't evacuate previously. The war that was contained to southern Israel in round 1 will spread deeper into central Israel in round 2. Not because Hamas became more ambitious, because Hamas became more capable. During the ceasefire, the warheads that carried 20 kilograms of explosives in round 1 are being replaced with warheads that carry 30 kilograms in round 2. The damage that was significant in round 1 will be greater in round 2. The casualties that were serious in round 1 will be worse in round 2. 20 kilograms of explosives destroys a room, maybe 2 rooms, maybe kills everyone in those rooms if they're unlucky enough to be there when the rocket hits. 30 kilograms destroys a floor, maybe 2 floors. Maybe kills everyone on those floors plus people on adjacent floors from blast effects and shrapnel and structural collapse. The difference sounds small, 10 kilograms, 50% increase, but the effects aren't linear, they're exponential. Blast radius increases, shrapnel spread increases, structural damage increases, casualty radius increases. A 50% increase in explosive mass produces more than 50% increase in damage, produces more than 50% increase in casualties, produces exponentially worse effects. My intelligence service obtained samples, not from Gaza, we don't operate there, but from shipments intercepted by other countries. Egypt intercepted 1 shipment. Shared intelligence with regional partners. We analyzed the warhead designs, we calculated the blast effects, we modeled the damage patterns, we projected the casualties. The numbers are worse than round 1. Significantly worse. A 20-kilogram warhead hitting an apartment building in round 1 killed an average of 3 people per direct hit, wounded an average of 12 more, destroyed an average of 4 apartments, made an average of 8 apartments uninhabitable. Those are the round 1 statistics. Documented, verified, real. A 30-kilogram warhead hitting the same apartment building will kill an average of 5 people per direct hit, will wound an average of 20 more, will destroy an average of 7 apartments, will make an average of 15 apartments uninhabitable. Those are the projected round 2 statistics, based on blast modeling, based on structural analysis, based on casualty calculations, based on physics that doesn't care about politics, and Hamas will fire thousands of these rockets, not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. They smuggled enough components during the ceasefire to build thousands of upgraded warheads. They manufactured them during the pause. They stockpiled them during the peace. They prepared to fire them in round 2. So multiply those casualties by thousands of rockets, calculate the total, project the deaths. The numbers are staggering. The numbers are worse than round 1. The numbers prove round 2 will be more lethal, not because Hamas became more evil, because Hamas became more capable. During the ceasefire, everyone celebrated. The accuracy that was poor in round 1 is being improved for round 2. Not precision guidance. Hamas doesn't have that technology, but better aiming systems, better launch calculations, better targeting data. The rockets that missed by kilometers in round 1 will miss by hundreds of meters in round 2. Still not accurate, but more accurate, which means more hits, which means more damage, which means more deaths. Hamas rockets in round 1 were essentially unguided. Point in general direction, light the fuse, hope it goes roughly where you aimed. Most missed by kilometers, most hit nothing. Most landed in empty fields or open areas or the Mediterranean. The ones that hit buildings or killed people were mostly luck. Terrible luck for the victims, but luck nonetheless. Not skill, not precision. Just probability over volume. Fire enough rockets and some will hit something. Round 2 will be different, not precision guided. Hamas still doesn't have GPS guidance or laser targeting or any of the sophisticated systems that make modern missiles accurate, but they have improvements. Incremental improvements. Small improvements that add up to significantly better accuracy. Better launch systems. The crude launchers used in round 1 are being replaced with stabilized platforms. Not sophisticated. Just more stable. Just more consistent. Just more reliable. The rocket that wobbled on launch in round 1 will launch straighter in round 2. The trajectory that varied wildly in round 1 will vary less in round 2. The aim that was guesswork in round 1 will be more calculated in round 2. Better meteorological data. Hamas didn't account for wind in round 1, didn't calculate for air density, didn't adjust for atmospheric conditions, just pointed and fired. Round 2 will be different. Not because Hamas has weather satellites, but because they have access to weather data from civilian sources, from internet, from apps anyone can download. They'll know wind speed. They'll know wind direction. They'll calculate basic corrections. The rocket that missed by 3 kilometers due to crosswind in round 1 will miss by 300 meters in round 2. Better targeting data. Hamas didn't have detailed maps in round 1, didn't have precise coordinates, didn't have accurate distances, just aimed at cities, just fired toward population centers. Just hoped to hit something. Round 2 will be different. Because during the ceasefire, Hamas acquired better maps, downloaded satellite imagery, calculated precise coordinates, measured exact distances. They know where specific buildings are. They know where specific installations are. They know where specific targets are. They still can't hit them precisely, but they can aim more accurately, can get closer, can increase hit probability. My intelligence service obtained Hamas training materials, smuggled out by sources I can't name, manuals on improved launch procedures, guides on meteorological corrections, charts on targeting calculations. Everything Hamas is teaching their rocket crews during the ceasefire, everything that will make round 2 more accurate than round 1. One manual shows launch angle calculations based on target distance and wind conditions. Basic trigonometry, high school level math, but Hamas crews didn't use it in round 1, they will use it in round 2. The difference between firing blind and firing with basic calculations is significant, not precision, but improvement, not accuracy, but better accuracy. Another manual shows targeting priorities, specific buildings, specific installations, specific locations, with coordinates, with distances, with recommended launch angles. Hamas is teaching their crews to aim at specific targets instead of general areas. They still won't hit those specific targets most of the time, but they'll get closer. They'll hit nearby buildings more often, they'll cause more damage to intended areas, they'll kill more people in targeted zones. The rockets that missed by kilometers in round 1 will miss by hundreds of meters in round 2. Still not accurate, but more accurate, which means more hits, which means more damage, which means more deaths. Run the numbers. Hamas fired 10,000 rockets in round 1, approximately 300 hit buildings, approximately 100 killed people, 3% hit rate, 1% kill rate. Terrible accuracy, but still deadly because of volume. Round 2 projections based on improved accuracy. Hamas fires 10,000 rockets with better aim, approximately 600 hit buildings, approximately 200 kill people, 6% hit rate, 2% kill rate, doubled effectiveness. Same number of rockets, twice the damage, twice the deaths, because of improvements made during the ceasefire. And these are conservative estimates, based on modest improvements, based on basic corrections, based on simple calculations. If Hamas improvements are better than projected, if their accuracy increases more than estimated, if their hit rates improve beyond calculations, then round 2 casualties will be even higher. Then round 2 damage will be even greater. Then round 2 deaths will be even worse. This is what the ceasefire produced. This is what the pause enabled. This is what peace looks like when peace is just preparation for war. Hamas used the time to improve. Used the pause to upgrade. Used the ceasefire to become more lethal. And round 2 will prove it. Round 2 will demonstrate it. Round 2 will kill more people because Hamas spent the ceasefire learning how to kill more effectively. The destruction will be greater because the targets are better identified, because Israel spent the ceasefire mapping every Hamas position, because they know exactly what to hit, because they identified what survived round 1 and targeted it for round 2. Israeli intelligence didn't rest during the ceasefire, didn't relax, didn't celebrate peace. They worked harder than during the war, more systematically than during combat, more thoroughly than during fighting. Because they knew round 2 was coming, because they knew they needed better intelligence, because they knew round 1 left gaps that round 2 needed to fill. Surveillance drones flew daily, over Gaza, mapping terrain, photographing buildings, recording changes, documenting reconstruction, identifying patterns, tracking movements, building comprehensive intelligence picture. Every day, every flight, every image, every data point, building toward round 2. The building that survived Israeli airstrikes in round 1 because Israel didn't know it housed Hamas operations is now identified, photographed from multiple angles, mapped with precise coordinates, analyzed for structural vulnerabilities, assigned target priority, designated for destruction in round 2. It survived round 1 through luck and Israeli ignorance. It won't survive round 2. Because Israel knows now, because Israel mapped it during the ceasefire, because Israel will hit it early in round 2. The tunnel entrance that Israel missed in round 1 is now located, detected through ground-penetrating radar, confirmed through signal intelligence, verified through human sources, mapped with exact coordinates, designated for bunker-buster bombs in round 2. It survived round 1 because Israel didn't know where it was. It won't survive round 2. Because Israel found it during the ceasefire. Because Israel will destroy it in round 2. The command center that Israel struck in round 1 but didn't destroy completely is now fully mapped. Every room photographed, every entrance identified, every exit documented. Every structural element analyzed, every weak point noted, designated for complete destruction in round 2. It survived round 1 because Israel's intelligence was incomplete. It won't survive round 2. Because Israel's intelligence is now complete. Because Israel spent the ceasefire filling every gap. My intelligence service obtained Israeli target lists, not officially, through channels I can't reveal, classified documents, target priorities, strike sequences, weapon assignments. Everything Israel plans for round 2. The lists are longer than round 1, more detailed than round 1, more comprehensive than round 1, more lethal than round 1. Round 1 target list, approximately 3,000 targets. Round 2 target list, approximately 5,000 targets. 67% increase, not because Hamas grew by 67%, because Israeli intelligence improved by 67%, because Israel identified targets during the ceasefire they didn't know about during round 1, because Israel will strike more comprehensively in round 2 than they struck in round 1. And the targets aren't just more numerous, they're better categorized, better prioritized, better sequenced. Israel learned from round 1, learned what to hit first. Learned what to hit hardest, learned what to hit repeatedly, learned how to maximize destruction, and they're applying those lessons in round 2 planning. Round 1 struck targets somewhat randomly, based on intelligence available at the time, based on opportunities as they arose, based on tactical situations as they developed. Round 2 will strike systematically, based on comprehensive intelligence gathered during ceasefire, based on careful planning during the pause, based on strategic sequencing designed for maximum effect. First wave, command and control. Take out Hamas leadership locations, destroy communication centers, eliminate coordination capability, make Hamas blind and leaderless from the start. Round 1 didn't do this effectively. Round 2 will, because Israel knows where everything is now, because Israel mapped it during the ceasefire. Second wave, rocket capabilities, destroy launch sites, eliminate rocket stockpiles, take out manufacturing facilities, reduce Hamas' ability to strike Israeli cities. Round 1 did this partially. Round 2 will do it completely, because Israel knows where everything is now, because Israel identified it during the ceasefire. Third wave, tunnel network, collapse main tunnels, destroy entrance points, eliminate underground infrastructure, remove Hamas mobility advantage. Round 1 did this inadequately. Round 2 will do it thoroughly, because Israel mapped the entire network during the ceasefire, because Israel knows where to strike now. This is why the destruction will be greater in round 2. Not because Israel became more brutal, because Israel became more knowledgeable, because Israel used the ceasefire to gather intelligence, because Israel will strike more effectively in round 2 than they struck in round 1, because peace was preparation for war. Round 1 destroyed neighborhoods, round 2 will destroy more. Not randomly, systematically, because every building that housed Hamas operations was identified during the ceasefire. Because every structure that sheltered fighters was mapped, because every location that stored weapons was documented. Israel knows what to hit, they know where to strike, they know how to maximize destruction. Israeli intelligence didn't rest during the ceasefire, they worked. Surveillance drones flew daily, satellites photographed constantly, informants reported continuously. Signal intelligence monitored communications, human intelligence gathered information. Every intelligence capability Israel has was focused on Gaza during the ceasefire. They mapped every tunnel entrance, every weapons cache, every command center, every fighter position, every rocket launcher, every mortar position, every sniper nest, every defensive position. Everything Hamas has, everything Hamas built, everything Hamas prepared, all mapped, all documented, all targeted for round 2. The buildings that survived Israeli airstrikes in round 1, because Israel didn't know they housed Hamas operations, are now identified. They won't survive round 2. The tunnels that survived because Israel didn't know where they were are now mapped. They won't survive round 2. The positions that survived because they were well concealed are now documented. They won't survive round 2. Israel learned from round 1. They identified their intelligence gaps. They filled them during the ceasefire. They know more about Hamas positions now than they knew at the start of round 1, which means they can target more effectively, which means they can destroy more completely, which means round 2 will be more devastating than round 1. And Hamas knows what to defend. They spent the ceasefire fortifying what survived. They reinforced what Israel will target. They prepared for the bombardment they know is coming, which means Israel will have to hit harder to achieve the same effect, which means more explosives, which means greater destruction, which means worse devastation. Hamas knows Israel mapped their positions. They know Israeli intelligence was active during the ceasefire. They know round 2 will target what round 1 missed, so they prepared, they fortified, they defended. The tunnel entrance that Israel now knows about is fortified. Reinforced entrance, multiple escape routes, harder to collapse. The weapons cache that Israel now knows about is dispersed, spread across multiple locations, harder to destroy completely. The command center that Israel now knows about is relocated, moved to a different building, harder to target accurately. This creates an escalation dynamic. Israel knows more, so they target more. Hamas knows Israel knows more, so they fortify more. Israel knows Hamas fortified, so they use more powerful weapons. Hamas knows Israel will use more powerful weapons, so they build deeper bunkers. Each side's preparation forces the other side to prepare more. Each side's improvement forces the other side to improve more. The result is round 2 being worse than round 1 for everyone. The suffering will be deeper, because the hatred has intensified during the pause, because both sides used the ceasefire to reinforce narratives of victimhood, because both sides spent the pause preparing their populations for round 2. Israeli citizens spent the ceasefire being told Hamas is regrouping, Hamas is rearming, Hamas is preparing to attack again. The government warned them. The media repeated it. The security establishment emphasized it. Israelis know round two is coming. They expect it. They're mentally prepared for it, and when it comes, they'll support it. Because they were conditioned during the ceasefire to see it as inevitable and necessary. Turn on Israeli television during the ceasefire. Watch the news. See the reports. Hamas rebuilding tunnel network. Intelligence warns of Hamas rearmament. Security officials, next round of fighting inevitable. Every day. Every broadcast, every channel, constant messaging that round two is coming. The government holds press conferences. Ministers warn about Hamas capabilities. Military officials brief journalists about threats. Intelligence chiefs testify to parliament about dangers. All during the ceasefire. All while everyone else celebrates peace. All preparing the Israeli public to support round two when it comes. Israeli citizens who were traumatized by Hamas rockets in round one are being told those rockets are coming back. Israeli families who lost loved ones in round one are being told Hamas is preparing to kill more. Israeli communities that were evacuated in round one are being told they might be evacuated again in round two. The fear from round one isn't healing during the ceasefire. It's being reinforced. It's being maintained. It's being prepared for round two. This is deliberate. This is strategic. This is the Israeli government ensuring public support for round two. Because they know round two is coming. Because they're preparing for it. Because they need their population ready to support it when it starts. When round two begins, Israeli citizens won't question it. They won't protest it. They won't oppose it. They'll support it. Because they spent the ceasefire being conditioned to expect it, being warned it was inevitable, being told it was necessary, being prepared to see it not as aggression but as self-defense. Palestinian civilians spent the ceasefire burying their dead from round one, mourning their losses, treating their wounded, rebuilding their destroyed homes, all while knowing it's temporary. All while understanding round two is coming, all while recognizing this pause is just preparation for more war. The trauma from round one hasn't healed, the grief hasn't processed, the anger hasn't subsided, and round two will compound it all. Walk through Gaza during the ceasefire, visit the cemeteries, see the fresh graves, thousands of them, families burying loved ones killed in round one, fathers burying children, mothers burying husbands, children burying parents. The grief is overwhelming, the loss is devastating, the pain is unbearable. But there's no time to grieve properly, because they're also rebuilding, clearing rubble, repairing homes, trying to restore some normalcy, trying to create some stability, trying to survive. All while knowing it's temporary, all while understanding the buildings they're repairing might be destroyed again in round two, all while recognizing the homes they're rebuilding might be bombed again soon. This creates a specific kind of trauma. Not just the trauma of loss, but the trauma of anticipation, not just mourning what was lost, but dreading what will be lost next, not just grieving the dead, but fearing for the living, not just processing past trauma, but preparing for future trauma. This is what the ceasefire creates for Palestinians. Not peace, not healing, just anxious waiting for the next round. And the anger intensifies, because they're not just angry about round one. They're angry that round two is coming. They're not just grieving their losses. They're enraged that more losses are inevitable. They're not just traumatized by what happened. They're furious that it will happen again. The ceasefire doesn't reduce the anger. It concentrates it. It ferments it. It weaponizes it. Hamas uses this. Hamas channels this anger. Hamas recruits from this rage. Hamas tells young men that round two is coming, and they can either be victims again or they can fight back. Hamas tells traumatized youth that they can either wait to die or they can resist. Hamas tells angry teenagers that they can either accept occupation or they can join the resistance. And many join. Because the ceasefire gave them time to get angry, time to want revenge, time to prepare to fight. Children who survived round one spent the ceasefire growing up in destroyed neighborhoods, playing in rubble, walking past demolished buildings, living with trauma, being raised in an environment of loss and rage and preparation for the next war. They're not healing during this ceasefire. They're hardening. They're being shaped into the next generation of fighters. They're being prepared to hate more deeply than their parents hated. 10-year-old Fatima plays in the ruins of what used to be her school. It was destroyed in round 1. Israeli airstrike. They said Hamas was using it. Maybe they were. Maybe they weren't. Doesn't matter to Fatima. Her school is gone. Her teacher is dead. Her friends are scattered. Her education is interrupted. Her childhood is destroyed. Fatima doesn't understand ceasefires. She doesn't understand diplomacy. She doesn't understand peace processes. She understands that her school was bombed. She understands that her teacher died. She understands that her life was destroyed, and she's growing up in that understanding, being shaped by that trauma, being formed by that loss. What will Fatima become? What will she believe when she's 15, when she's 20, when she's old enough to make choices about resistance and violence and revenge? The ceasefire isn't giving her time to heal. It's giving her time to remember, time to internalize, time to hate. Multiply Fatima by thousands, by tens of thousands, by a generation of Palestinian children growing up in destroyed neighborhoods during ceasefires that don't address why their neighborhoods were destroyed, growing up traumatized during pauses that don't heal trauma, growing up angry during peace processes that don't deliver peace. This is what the ceasefire creates. This is the next generation. This is why the conflict never ends. This is why the suffering will be deeper in round 2, not just because more people will die, but because the people who die will be dying in a conflict that has become more hateful, more entrenched, more impossible to resolve, because each round creates the conditions for the next round to be worse, because each ceasefire prepares for more war instead of building toward real peace. Palestinian civilians spent the ceasefire burying their dead from round 1, mourning their losses, treating their wounded, rebuilding their destroyed homes, all while knowing it's temporary, all while understanding round 2 is coming, all while recognizing this pause is just preparation for more war. The trauma from round 1 hasn't healed, the grief hasn't processed, the anger hasn't subsided, and round 2 will compound it all. The hatred that existed before round 1 intensified during round 1. The hatred that intensified during round 1 deepened during the ceasefire. And the hatred that deepened during the ceasefire will explode during round 2. Each cycle makes it worse. Each round increases the rage. Each pause allows the anger to ferment without providing any actual resolution. Children who survived round 1 spent the ceasefire growing up in destroyed neighborhoods, playing in rubble, walking past demolished buildings, living with trauma, being raised in an environment of loss and rage and preparation for the next war. They're not healing during this ceasefire. They're hardening. They're being shaped into the next generation of fighters. They're being prepared to hate more deeply than their parents hated. This is why the suffering will be deeper. This is why round 2 will be worse than round 1. This is why ceasefires that don't address root causes just prepare for worse violence. And the international community will act shocked. They'll condemn the violence. They'll call for restraint. They'll demand another ceasefire. They'll pretend they didn't see this coming. When everyone saw it coming, when the terms of the ceasefire guaranteed it would come, when the whole structure was designed to pause, not to end. The UN Security Council will hold emergency sessions. The Secretary General will issue statements expressing grave concern. The Human Rights Council will condemn violations by both sides. The General Assembly will debate resolutions. Everyone will perform their roles. Everyone will say their lines. Everyone will pretend this is unexpected. But it's not unexpected. It's inevitable. It's built into the system. It's the predictable result of ceasefires designed to pause rather than resolve. It's what happens when you stop the fighting without addressing why they're fighting. It's what occurs when you treat symptoms without curing the disease. The United States will call for de-escalation while continuing to supply weapons to Israel. They'll urge restraint while approving military aid packages. They'll advocate for peace while ensuring one side has overwhelming military superiority. The contradiction won't be acknowledged. The hypocrisy won't be addressed. The pattern will continue. Europe will express concern while maintaining economic relationships with both sides. They'll condemn violence while profiting from arms sales. They'll advocate for human rights while supporting occupation. The inconsistency won't be examined. The complicity won't be confronted. The cycle will repeat. Arab states will issue statements supporting Palestinians while doing nothing substantive to help them. They'll condemn Israeli actions while maintaining diplomatic and economic relationships. They'll express solidarity while prioritizing their own interests. The performance will be noted. The inaction will be remembered. The betrayal will be complete. And after weeks of fighting, after thousands more dead, after greater destruction, after deeper suffering, they'll negotiate another ceasefire, another temporary pause, another strategic reload, another preparation for round 3. I've watched this pattern repeat for 20 years. Different conflicts, different countries, different parties, same pattern. Ceasefire announced, international celebration, strategic reload. Hostilities resume. More death, more destruction. Another ceasefire, another reload, another round. Gaza 2008, Operation Cast Lead, 22 days of fighting, 1,400 Palestinians killed, 13 Israelis killed, ceasefire announced, international community celebrated, both sides reloaded. 3 years of preparation. Gaza 2012, Operation Pillar of Defense, 8 days of fighting, 160 Palestinians killed, 6 Israelis killed, ceasefire announced, international community celebrated, both sides reloaded. 2 years of preparation. Gaza 2014, Operation Protective Edge, 50 days of fighting, 2,200 Palestinians killed, 73 Israelis killed, ceasefire announced. International community celebrated, both sides reloaded. 7 years of preparation. Gaza 2021, Operation Guardian of the Walls, 11 days of fighting, 260 Palestinians killed, 13 Israelis killed, ceasefire announced, international community celebrated, both sides reloaded. 2 years of preparation. Gaza 2023, Operation Swords of Iron, months of fighting, tens of thousands of Palestinians killed, hundreds of Israelis killed, ceasefire announced, international community celebrated, both sides reloading, preparing for 2025. Each round worse than the last, each ceasefire shorter than the previous, each reload faster than before, each cycle more deadly than the one before it. The pattern is clear, the trajectory is obvious, the outcome is predictable. The cycle never ends, because the ceasefires never address root causes, because the pauses never establish justice, because the agreements never end occupation, because the terms never guarantee real peace. What are the root causes? Occupation, blockade, settlements, refugees, Jerusalem, borders, security, sovereignty, recognition, rights, justice, everything that matters, everything that drives the conflict, everything that makes peace impossible without resolution, none of it addressed by ceasefires, none of it resolved by pauses, none of it ended by temporary cessation of hostilities. The occupation continues during ceasefires, checkpoints remain, movement restrictions persist, military control endures, Palestinians live under Israeli authority without Israeli citizenship, without rights, without freedom, without justice. The fundamental injustice that drives the conflict continues uninterrupted by ceasefires that only pause the fighting without ending the occupation. The blockade continues during ceasefires, Gaza remains sealed, imports restricted, exports blocked, movement prevented, 2 million people trapped in an open-air prison, unable to leave, unable to trade freely, unable to live normally. The collective punishment that radicalizes generations continues uninterrupted by ceasefires that only pause the violence without lifting the siege. The settlements continue during ceasefires. Construction doesn't stop, expansion doesn't pause, confiscation doesn't end, Palestinian land continues being taken, Palestinian homes continue being demolished, Palestinian families continue being displaced. The colonization that makes two-state solution impossible continues uninterrupted by ceasefires that only pause the fighting without freezing the facts on the ground. They just pause the fighting long enough for both sides to prepare to fight harder. And the world celebrates each pause as if it's peace, as if temporary cessation of hostilities is the same as ending the conflict, as if stopping the killing for a few months while preparing to kill more later is victory. CNN runs headlines, ceasefire brings hope for lasting peace. BBC reports, diplomatic breakthrough ends latest Gaza conflict. Reuters announces, international community welcomes ceasefire agreement. Al Jazeera declares, guns fall silent as ceasefire takes hold. But the guns haven't fallen silent. They've just paused. They're being cleaned, being reloaded, being prepared for the next round. The silence isn't peace, it's preparation. It's the quiet before the next storm, it's the reload. Social media celebrates. People change their profile pictures back from flags to normal photos. Activists move on to other causes. Attention shifts to other crises. The world stops watching, stops caring, stops paying attention until the next round starts, until the violence resumes, until the killing continues. Then everyone acts surprised. Everyone asks what happened. Everyone wonders why peace failed. It's not victory. It's a scam. It's a game. It's a system that perpetuates war while pretending to pursue peace. And I'm calling it out because somebody has to, because somebody needs to tell people what's really happening, because somebody needs to warn them that this ceasefire is just a reload, that round 2 is coming, that it will be worse, that they should prepare for it instead of celebrating peace that isn't peace. Yesterday, after my press conference, my chief of staff came to my office. He said, "Mr. President, you're getting a lot of criticism. People are saying you're against peace, that you're being negative, that you're undermining diplomatic efforts." I said, "I'm not against peace. I'm against lying about what peace is. I'm not being negative. I'm being honest about what's coming. I'm not undermining diplomatic efforts. I'm exposing that these diplomatic efforts are designed to pause, not to end." He said, "But the international community." I said, "The international community knows I'm right. They just don't want me saying it, because saying it destroys their narrative. Because admitting this ceasefire is temporary destroys their ability to claim victory. Because acknowledging round 2 is coming destroys their credibility when round 2 actually comes and they act surprised." I leaned forward, looked him in the eye, and said what I've been saying since this ceasefire was announced. They know this is temporary. They know round 2 is coming. They know both sides are reloading. They know this pause will end in more violence. They know everything I'm saying is true. But they can't admit it, because admitting it means admitting their entire approach is failing, admitting their diplomatic framework is broken, admitting their peace process is a scam that perpetuates the conflict it claims to resolve. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "So what do we do?" I said, "We tell the truth. We document what's happening during this ceasefire. We track the reload. We warn people round 2 is coming. We prepare for it. We don't pretend this pause is peace. We don't celebrate temporary cessation as if it's victory. We stay honest. We stay ready. We stay real." I pulled out a folder, the one my intelligence service has been compiling, the one documenting the reload, the one tracking what's happening during the ceasefire everyone calls peace.